All right, welcome to the first episode talking about gear for the Experience Project. It's no coincidence that we are starting with footwear. It is the number one most important thing that you need to pay attention to and take care of, and make sure that you've got the right choice for you on your upcoming hunt. When your feet are killing you, there's nothing that's going to derail a hunt faster than blisters, hot spots. Your feet are sliding around in the shoe, it's just uncomfortable. Every step is painful. It's like you can deal with, maybe your tent isn't as good as you want, or your sleeping bag is not as warm as you want, or your pad's not as comfortable as you want. Like, there's a lot of gear items that are, you could deal with things that aren't ideal. Footwear is one, packs are number two, where you really, really want to get this dialed in before a hunt. Do not ever buy a pair of, I'm going to try to say footwear as often as possible, because I think boots sometimes refer to like really big, heavy, stiff boots, and a lot of times the choice could be tennis shoes that are most appropriate for your hunt. Just be aware that you should not have uncomfortable feet. If you've just accepted the fact that you've got hot spots and blisters and your feet kill you, and when you get back to camp, the very first thing you want to do is sit down and take those off and let your feet breathe, put on a camp shoe. To me, that's a really good indicator that you need to keep looking. Basically, all of the boot companies, in my opinion, get like an F grade for how they steer you into boot choices. There's a lot of information that's lacking about how they're constructed, the amount of flex that's built into them, the type of foot that they're designed to fit. Every boot is built off of a last, and the last is specific to that boot, or kind of in a section. If I owned a boot company, the very first thing I'd do on my website, you couldn't look at any of the models. It would just be a quiz, a footwear quiz of what does your foot look like, and I'd simply have you put your foot on a piece of paper, trace the outline of it, and then compare that with images, and then I would say, all right, here's the 2 or 3 models that will work for your foot. So you really need to understand what your foot is and the type of last that the boot is designed around, right? So that some people, myself included, I've got a lot of shape to my foot. If you kind of look at it from the top, or if I were to step in the sand, it's got a really heavy hourglass shape to it. Other people have a really flat foot. You could kind of almost, brick-like Flintstone foot, right? It's very square. What works for me is not going to work for that person, right? We're 2 different footwear styles. And so boot companies don't do a good job of educating you on this boot's designed to fit this person. They're just kind of like, well, we'll send it to you. You try it out. Oh, by the way, you took it out on the field one day. We're not going to accept your returns. Like, they need to do, in my opinion, a much, much better job of helping steer people in the right direction. This is here is just a prop, because it's simply saying, like, most hunting boots are closer to this than they are to this. And I think that's a big mistake, frankly. Our body biomechanically wants to be in a shoe. That's how we're designed, not to wear shoes at all, right? Like, we've got the mobility and ability to adjust within our foot and ankle for different types of terrain. And when you put yourself in a brace, also known as just a stiff, heavy leather boot that's your traditional hunting boot, you are limiting yourself. You're changing your biomechanics, how you walk, your gait. If you're not used to that, if you haven't kind of built up to it, you're going to create issues. You're transferring, if you're putting your entire foot and ankle into a stiff brace, you're transferring all that torque up to your knee, translates into your hips. I think in the long run, that's not going to be good for you, and you're not going to perform as well as you could have. You're going to have more fatigue, more joint pain, more issues. The goal is to get to that lighter, more flexible footwear that frankly, you're just going to perform better. You're going to be more comfortable. You're going to have less fatigue, less joint pain. It's just how our body's naturally designed to move. But for the most part, the hunting market and general boot market, like mountaineering stuff, steers you into these very stiff boots, and I just think that's a big mistake. Another kind of area to talk through and discuss is generally what makes a boot durable. That's going to last, multiple seasons. And I don't even like talking about seasons, because that could be very different if you're just coming out to Idaho to elk hunt for 7 days. A pair of boots could last you 10 years, but you're a guy who shed hunts and bear hunts and scouts all summer. You're spending 50, 75, 100 days in the field a year. I certainly was in that 100 days a year prior to kids, just out there a lot. And so you really need to rate like footwear on like how many days it's going to last out in the field, and also the type of terrain you're in will dictate how long it lasts. But in general, the stiff, heavy leather boot that's designed to last a long time everything about designing for long-term durability is going to be counterproductive to how it performs on that day, right? Like stiff, heavy leather, one, it's not going to kind of mold to your foot as well, so you're not going to grab onto your foot. Two, it's going to be heavy. Heavy really does matter. There'll be another side kind of video segment to this footwear section where I'm trying to basically put some actual numbers to how much adding weight to your feet affects you. So I'm doing timed hikes, doing the exact same hike, the exact same weight in the backpack, and timing basically the time it takes to hike 1.8 miles with just the pack and like trail running shoes on. Then I'm going to do that 3 or 4 times, get an average, also measure my heart rate. So you're kind of getting time and heart rate as a measure of your output. Then I'll do that with 1 pound ankle weights, which would be the difference between, easily the difference between a lightweight pair and a heavyweight pair of boots is 1 pound. Measure that, and then I'll go back into, I'm sure a lot of people have heard the concept of like 1 pound on your foot equals 10 pounds in your pack. I'm gonna try to do my best to get that figure as close as possible. And it's not gonna be perfect, but just give you an idea that it does matter. And just to do like an extreme example, we did the death hike this year, right? It was like 108,000 steps over the course of 1 day, hiked 51 miles. And if I were to do that with 1 pound heavier footwear, that's 110,000 pounds I lifted that day. And it's why you've got a lot of muscles between your legs, right? So you don't necessarily feel that pound on every single step, but just think of the accumulation of that 100 and some odd thousand pounds that you're packing around. Like, there will be a massive amount of fatigue difference at the end of the day. And that's an extreme example, but whether you're hunting 2-3 miles or 10 miles that day, you will feel that. So erring on the lighter side, I think, is really important. Obviously, you can go too light where you're sacrificing durability. You do need some stability and some support out there. I will eventually get to like the perfect boot for me. I've looked, doesn't exist. Every single one of these is a footwear boot choice that I have hunted with, even Crocs, except for this. So I'm going to go through eventually here like what I like and dislike about all these options, and kind of get to like what I think the perfect boot choice is. To me, it doesn't exist yet. I have yet to find it, but someday it will, and I'll be super thrilled about that. So to kind of back up and just go big picture for a second, I just want to express that you do not have to have uncomfortable feet. There's no reason for it. There is going to be a footwear choice, a sock choice, and an insole choice out there that works for you. Don't just settle. Don't just assume that your feet have to kill you. And really trying to we're going to dive deep into all this stuff so that you can have the tools to, you could do a 20-mile pack out and get done with it and go, my feet are a little tired, but I got no issues with them. I could take a little rest and get right back to it, right? So the features that I'm looking for, I want, you do need some, in this type of country, especially this caribou hunt in particular, uneven, broken terrain. I also certainly noticed when I can't predict what my foot's going to do. A good example is when you're hiking on crusted snow. Like every step you take, you might break through it, or you might walk on top of it for 3 or 4 steps. So when you're kind of thinking about that in like general country, you're not walking on snow, but if the ground underneath you is unpredictable, if you're on rocks, shale rock that good, and all of a sudden you slip, or you're on kind of that muskegee Alaska country where it's very unpredictable, very rocky stuff where the rocks are rolling, I do think you need some ankle support to kind of give you a little bit of a brace there, so you're not having to just stare at your feet the entire time. So that when you get down to the lower stuff, I love, these are actually filthy because I elk hunted in these last year. I ran waterproof socks and ran around the mountains of central Idaho for a week and absolutely freaking loved them. They were fantastic. But that's in predictable terrain. Again, on Alaska on these hunts, I do think an all-around good choice is something that's like an 8-inch tall boot. Obviously for me with my kind of hourglass shaped foot, which I don't have hard data on this, but I'd venture most people have that shape. I want basically the heel cup to lock my heel in place, and then you need to have the midfoot of the boot be able to actually wrap around and grab onto your foot. That's where basically if it's kind of a straight boot, there's nothing stopping your foot from sliding all the way into the front, into the toe box. You're going downhill and your toes are just jamming into that. Where if you've got a boot that's designed to kind of clamp around the middle of your foot, hold it in place, then it's going to prevent that sliding forward. So I'm looking for synthetic. Frankly, there's a lot of pros to synthetics in my opinion. I would say traditionally they are going to be less durable, but that's certainly not the case. There's a lot of good synthetic options out there that can last a long time. I've got examples here. Again, I've worn all of these on different hunts, different times, and I'm just going to talk through like, okay, this is what I like about this one, this is what I don't like, and just kind of work through it just to show you. Try to hone in on like what I'm looking for in a boot. Again, I've yet to find the perfect one yet, and I'm hoping someday it exists. Maybe some manufacturers watching this video and be like, okay, I'm going to build that boot now. But I want synthetic because it's going to be able to, it's more flexible. It's going to be adapt to my foot. A stiff leather is going to have a tough time molding to my foot, and you really want to, again, mold to your foot and grab. You don't want slop, you don't want dead space, you want contact with the shoe all the way throughout it. And that's going to give like even distribution. You're not going to have pressure points. So I want synthetic, 8-inch tall. There's certainly a time and place for non-Gore-Tex footwear. I would just say if you said I had to have one footwear choice, then I would want Gore-Tex for hunting. Summer backpacking time, warmer weather. It's like getting your feet wet as you're crossing a stream and they dry right out within 30 minutes is a better solution than being kind of wet inside a boot all day long. But I do think as an all-around hunting boot, Gore-Tex is probably going to be your best bet. There is something there with like a Gore-Tex sock and a completely breathable boot, but that's I haven't really dialed that in yet. Synthetic is also going to breathe a lot better, right? A leather's not going to breathe well when your foot's in there. My feet sweat a lot. There's a training hike I do right outside of Boise. I call it the sheep hike. Just like when hey Mark, I did the sheep hike today, because he knows what it is. I started doing it when I was training for my first sheep hunt back in 2020, where I really needed to get off trail and do a lot more aggressive terrain. And I did that actually in these Hanwag Alverstones, and it was like a 90-degree day. There's variations of it, but 3 miles, 2,000 feet, all off trail, steep stuff. And I took my boots off when I got back to the truck and could wring out my socks. There was so much sweat in there. The next day I do that, and these, both Gore-Tex but synthetic, and the socks were damp. The difference in breathability was absolutely dramatic. Having dry feet is going to prevent blisters, going to prevent other foot issues that are going to pop up over the course of a longer hunt. I want a good amount of flexibility. I want the toes to roll up. I want to be able to kind of twist laterally like this. You want that shoe to adapt to the terrain underneath you. If this is a rock and I step on it, if this is a stiff sole, the point of contact is just going to be right there. Where with a softer sole, it's going to kind of wrap and form around it. So you're going to get a lot better traction. You're going to be able to move quicker and easier through rough country. If I had to go 10 miles of boulder fields, big 2-3 foot boulders, and you said take a trail running shoe or take a stiffer boot, I would take that trail running shoe every single time, right? It's gonna, as I step on that rock, my ankle is going to allow the footwear to like lay flat against that rock, or if you got a stiffer boot, it's not going to flex, it's not going to move, and you're going to have really poor traction. It's going to be hard to move through that country. The bigger boots, the stiffer boots are also just going to be more clumsy, right? Like that same thing, they're not molding to the terrain. You're going to lose a lot of efficiency hiking through that. So I want a good amount of flex, but you don't want too much. With a light pack or no pack at all, I want all the flex I can get when I do got 100 pounds on my back. This caribou hunt, I've been in this country before. We packed a ram 4,000 feet straight off this mountain. I was actually running this shoe right here. I wished I had a little bit more ankle support and a little bit more stiffness to kind of dig my heels in as I was sliding, basically sliding down that mountain all the way down to the river. So synthetic, good amount of twist, good flex. You want, is really understated how important traction is on the bottom of footwear. I've got multiple examples hiking and hunting with friends. Mark and I did. We were just on a training hike in the Boise foothills, and he was running Technica Forge boot. And it had a very interesting, what looked like good traction. We were both just hiking up the hill in like 4 inches of slush and snow. I was running a Salomon X Ultra at the time, some similar tread pattern to this, and I was able to just walk up the hill. Every 4 steps, Mark was sliding behind me. Having good kind of spaced out lugs, good depth to them, and a soft rubber compound is really going to give you the best amount of grip on a lot of country. I think this is an older pair of crispy Laponias, very shallow knobs. It's still a softer rubber, but shallow knobs. Like, you're going to slip and slide a lot more often than this. And again, it's sometimes you don't know. What we all lack a lot of the times is comparison in the moment. It's not like you got one footwear on your left side, another on your right with 2 different tread patterns to know which one's slipping and sliding more. Just through paying attention, I've kind of, because I've been so obsessed with footwear over the last 10, 15 years, I've learned like which ones work and which ones don't. So you want good deep lugs with a soft rubber compound. And I don't know how, it's not like this information is available to you, but I have noticed certain rubber compounds, when it's really cold outside, they freeze. They just get like rock hard, and then you lose all traction because that rubber isn't allowed to adapt and grab onto things anymore. It's just like a slip and slide. I'm also, let's see, to me, a lot of boots have a climbing zone in the toe and heel. That is, put it gently, completely idiotic for what we're doing in mountain hunting. The times where you're hiking on flat rocks and just doing what a rock climber would do, which was called smearing, right? Like, you got a flat rock and a rock climbing shoe is completely flat on the bottom, and you're trying to get as much surface area as possible to get traction. That's not how we're hiking. It is so rare that you'd be in a situation like that. To do this, especially on the toe and on the heel, every time you're taking a step, you're pushing off. So you're pushing off a flat surface. I hate it. Like, to me, it makes no sense. I think it's like something they do from a marketing perspective. A lot of boots are going away from it, but still you see it. And the more like, oh, this boot's designed for sheep hunting or something like that, the more you start to see that crap pop up. And the heel is even worse. So you're going downhill. You need that break. You need that stop, and you're just hitting a flat, smooth surface. So try to avoid that. This is about the absolute max that I would say is okay, but you get, something like this isn't going to have it at all. You're going to get way better traction when you're out there hunting. You don't want too much room in the toe box. There's a lot of advice you would see pop up of like, go half a size bigger in your footwear to allow for foot swell. I don't agree with that at all, because you can't control foot swell. And I'd rather have a slightly tighter boot, like what I would say is like a little bit more could be a more technical fit, than have a boot or a footwear be sloppy. Like, the last thing you want is your foot sliding around in there. Later on, I'll get to like socks and how to adjust for that. Also, insoles can adjust for that depending on your footwear choice. But don't half size up. Find a pair of boots that fit you just fine. You don't know if your feet are going to swell or not. My ideal pair is I can run like a thin sock and be just fine. And the more technical the terrain gets, I can run just a slightly thicker sock to kind of account for that. And you could do that same thing with foot swell, but don't ever half size up because someone told you your foot swells up over the course of a hunt. I think that's bad advice. The Gore-Tex lining, I mentioned Gore-Tex earlier that I'm looking for. Ideally, a good example, this Asolo Fugitive's a good example of one that there's 2 things going on here. One, if you can look inside the boot there, you see how this gray is the Gore-Tex lining. It covers all the way through the bottom of it. To me, that's a good indication that the boot company wasn't cutting corners and how they applied that Gore-Tex lining. So that the Gore-Tex basically comes in a bootie, it's put in and then glued to the inside of the footwear. Some companies will cut corners and not run that through the bottom of it. If it's done properly, which Hanwag does a good job of this, they don't put it in the bottom and they don't leak. But in general, it's going to be an indication that they kind of cut some corners in the Gore-Tex application. So look for Gore-Tex that's like a full bootie on the inside of there. And then also, like, my perfect footwear choice, these ones have a great example of it. The Gore-Tex runs all the way to the top of the tongue here, and the tongue is sewn in nearly to the top of the shoe. So obviously a big part of hunting is crossing streams or you get into a little boggy area and you get sometimes the footwear choice, like this Kinetrek's a good example of like how far the Gore-Tex drops down from the top of the footwear, the top of the boot. Ideally, I want that as high as possible. It's not a make or break thing for me, but if I'm designing my perfect boot, it'd be to get that as high as possible. You want good ankle support, but also you do want some articulation in there. I think the Hanwag did an excellent job on the Alverstone with this, where instead of the leather running all the way up the footwear, up the side of this, it has basically an ankle ability for this to twist left and right. So it still gives you that stability, but also doesn't limit your flexibility and movement, right? I think that was a really smart design choice on their part with this. They just went with, if you take this thing and made the whole thing synthetic and added a little bit more flex to the sole of this, that would be a really, really great footwear choice. Another thing that I'm looking for is some sort of impact resistance, basically in the heel, but also in the ball of the foot as well. You can take this A-sole is a good example of one that doesn't have anything. Like I'm putting my knuckle in the bottom of that and hitting the table. It's as if I'm hitting the table. There's absolutely no cushion built into that. Every time your heel strikes the ground, you want some shock absorption in there. You want that to give. Otherwise, at the end of the day, you're just going to have really tired feet. The same thing goes for the ball of foot. Is not as important because as we're hiking, that heel's striking the ground. So I'm looking for footwear that has a really good soft kind of heel strike to it, some type of cushioning built into it. A lot of hunting boots do not have that. And to me, it doesn't make any sense. None of those are factors that are going to lead to a comfortable foot. They may be a more durable choice, but going back to what I said, like almost all the things that point towards durability point towards not performing well for you on that specific day of hunting. I think the concept of I want to buy one boot and have it last a long time is really faulty thinking, right? Like I think you should really wrap your head more around like I want the most comfortable footwear choice I can possibly get, and then go from there and eke in towards durability versus starting like I want the most durable boot I can get and back into it. I think you kind of just need to accept that, again, everything that makes a boot durable is counterproductive to performance. So you just need to accept that boots have not great performance. Salomon's a good example of right out of the box. These things are amazing. I elk hunted, I think I bought these 4 years ago. They were waterproof for like 3 days. And then I don't know like why Salomon's are so terrible about being waterproof. These things are crazy comfortable. They're lightweight, they're mostly synthetic, they adapt to the foot really well, they've got a really good shape and last design to them. I would say, oh man, Salomon's definitely have, like in my circle of hunting friends, Salomon's have a great reputation as being extremely comfortable, but really lacking in durability and waterproofness. So it's like if somebody could take a Salomon and make it durable, that would be a really great option for everybody. But their Gore-Tex line just falls apart. And I don't know if it's, obviously the lining's in there and it's pinching and rubbing and, it's never going to last forever. It's just a waterproof membrane that's subject to wear and tear. And, I just think every time you take a step, that thing's, take a piece of plastic, bend it back and forth, eventually it's just going to snap in half. Well, fabric's going to be the same way in that regard. Every time you're flexing and moving that, it's going to break down to eventually where it's just going to leak. Keep bouncing around all over. Another thought that popped in my mind is one thing I really like about synthetic footwear, especially on these Alaska hunts, is going to be really wet. They're going to dry out substantially faster. So not only does your foot inside breathe well, dry faster, the material is going to dry faster. Going back to a Dall sheep hunt I did in 2020, my buddy Tyler was running a Hanwag like full leather boot. On that hunt, I was running a Loa Inox Pro, which is something closer to this, synthetic, super lightweight, much more like a trail, like a mid-height kind of trail running hiking shoe. And on the hike in, we had 15 miles to get where we were hunting, and it was just like one creek crossing after another. Like the first half of it was a big river, then it got to a creek, which I'm going to get to later talking about CROCS. basically with gaiters on, and we're this really narrow slot canyon, you're jumping back and forth across that creek a million times. Eventually, the water's going to get over your gaiter, get down into your boots. Although he had this really great durable leather boot with Gore-Tex, basically once it got saturated, they proceeded to be soaking wet and soggy for the next 3 days. And we had good sunny, dry weather. They were just, the leather was so thick, it was basically a big sponge, soaked it up, and it just doesn't dry out. Where my synthetic ones, literally pulled out the insoles later, put them in the sun, dried them out, put on dry socks, and within a few hours I had dry boots again. So I like synthetic for that reason, that when they do get wet, they have the chance to dry out. And I think it's just, you hunt wet enough country, whether it's raining or boggy country or very like that sheep hunt, a lot of creek crossings, eventually you're going to get wet, and it's more important to me that that dries out quicker than it is to have this leather durable boot. So that's something else to consider, and why I like synthetics. Really, like, there's nothing about leather that I like other than, sure, it's going to be durable, but they don't breathe, they don't dry out, they don't mold to your foot well, they take a long time to break in. The downside of the synthetics is I think they're obviously they're generally going to break down faster, not last as long. And I do think at some point, you know, you can get like a very sharp, maybe a pine needle or something like that can poke through that and put a hole into your Gore-Tex lining, where that's obviously not going to happen with leather. So maybe you deal with that Gore-Tex leaking faster, but also, you know, if they're both going to get wet eventually, I'd rather take the one that's going to dry out quicker. So that's kind of a long summary of what I'm looking for in a boot. I'll recap this real quick. I do highly encourage you. Mark and I talked about this for 2.5, 3 hours on the podcast and really dove into all these topics and some of the things I might have skipped over. There's so much here. Again, high level, just do not accept your feet killing you. So what I'm looking for, I want a synthetic boot, roughly 8 inches tall, some ankle, basically 8 inches tall for ankle stability, but some ability for that upper portion to flex and move with my foot. I want a good hourglass shape to the last so that my heel's locked into place. It's grabbing onto the middle of my foot, which is going to help prevent my foot sliding down. I like synthetic because it dries faster. It's able to mold to your foot better. It's going to breathe better than leather's going to. I want a good amount of flex. I want toe flex, so as I'm hiking, I have a natural gait to it. It's not a freaking stiff brace on my foot that's not allowing me to walk. I want the ability to twist left and right, so as I'm in uneven, broken terrain, it's not, all that force isn't being transferred up to my knee. My ankle and my foot, which is designed to do that, is able to do that and move with, like, the shoe's able to move with my foot and ankle. You do want some support though, right? Like, I mean, I think, I could do a hunt up there in a tennis shoe, but I do think like there's times and conditions where I'm gonna want some ankle support and a little bit more burly of a boot. Just nothing even close to, I don't really have any examples here of like a really stiff, heavy boot, but there's plenty of, I'd say it's the most popular hunting choice out there on the market. Good soft rubber compound, good like openly spaced, good deep lugs to get good traction. Do not want the flat climbing zone on the toe. That only sacrifices performance 90% of the time. In gear and footwear in particular, it's like a subtopic is like you gotta make your choices for what the bulk of your time is, right? Like if 95% of the time I'm hunting like, with a lightweight pack and I want a lighter shoe, I don't immediately go, well, that 5 to 10% of the time when I'm doing a pack out, that's when I want that really stiff, heavy boot, right? Like you need to kind of think about what I'm doing the bulk of the time, kind of really like that's where your core is, and then obviously there's pros and cons and a balance to everything, so maybe you back off that on something that gives you, like, so for me, I would love to hunt all the time in something like this, but you get in enough rough terrain that I do think like something a little bit more substantial is a good choice. Next, I'm just going to dive into all these different footwear choices. Again, I've worn all of these on different hunts and have experience with them and can give you pros and cons for them. So this is the Hanwag Alverstone. It's really a good shoe. It's heavier than I would like. I love the synthetic upper. I love the mobility of the ankle to move and rotate with you. It's got the lugs here are great. I hate the climbing zone on here. They were stiff, I think, companies could do a better job of telling you, like, some shoes are stiff and they break in over time. Some shoes kind of stay the same, just depends on the type of materials they're using here. These were really stiff at first, and they said give them time, give them 20 miles and they'll soften up, and they got a little bit better. You can see like there's some heel flex there, but that's a pretty stiff boot. This Asolo Fugitive, a lot of synthetic on it, which I really, really like. Love the Gore-Tex booty. It's a full Gore-Tex booty. It goes all the way through the bottom, runs up very high into the tongue. So if I step in a creek, that Gore-Tex is as high as possible. It gives me the most kind of flexibility for that's deeper than I thought, and water's not rushing into your shoe. Other than that, they're pretty stiff. They've got that very hard, no cushion built into that, so that impact is very firm. Your feet are going to kill you at the end of the day. This is a new boot this year called the Kinechek Bridger High. I technically haven't taken this on a hunt. I've done some training hikes with it. Pretty decent rubber lugs on the bottom of it. It doesn't have a lot of synthetics. It's got a synthetic tongue. It's got decent cushion. You can feel that when you're hiking, the cushion in there for a stiffer boot. I was optimistic that this was like a little bit more lighter, flexible when I saw it online and bought the pair. They're definitely a little bit stiffer. I think might be a good option for some guys, but for me, just a little too much. This is Crispy Laponia. To me, this is a really great boot that I believe they just came out with a new version this year where they revised, even like they have a better tread pattern on it. So things I don't like on this original version, older version, very small lugs. The rubber seemed to wear down pretty quick too. So you were really like within a season having about half of that. And that's that type of grip that I'm talking about earlier where you're slipping and sliding. You don't really know to blame the sole of your boot and your traction, but that is the biggest cause of your slipping and sliding. I wish had a little bit more of a technical fit to it. Hard to do with leather. If this was all synthetic, I think that'd be really great. They do have a full Gore-Tex booty on the inside. Crispy does a good job of that. I think no boot is waterproof. No boot company is perfect in their waterproofness, but you certainly start to see trends and themes within Hanwag versus Crispy versus Kinechek versus whatever. I think Crispy does a really good job overall of producing and generally a very waterproof boot. I love the flex. The weight of this is fantastic. That's one thing I didn't talk about earlier in weight. Like, try to be 3 pounds or less in your total footwear weight. So sometimes they give you the weight of a single boot or the pair. So as a pair, try to be 3 pounds or less. I believe these fall right in there. To me, that there's like a point there. It's same with like back. Like once my pack goes over 30 pounds, it's kind of like I feel like I'm wearing a pack. When it's under that, it's like I can do whatever I want all day long. With footwear, in my experience, that if you stay under 3 pounds, that's a pretty safe place to be. So yeah, nice and flexible, good lateral movement. Like this is a really, like you put this synthetic, give it a little bit more technical fit and better traction on the bottom of it. That'd be a really great choice in my opinion. Salomon, this is the Quest Element. Unbelievably comfortable, mainly synthetic, good traction, lightweight, just fantastic all around footwear other than the Gore-Tex lasting is terrible and durability is so-so. These are, I don't know how many days I got in these, quite a few, and there's no major issues with them, but not going to be something it's to me like what I would call like a season and a half boot, right? Like buying them September, you hunt all that fall, you get some spring hunts in, and by the time scouting season's done the next summer, you're kind of like, yeah, time to replace these. This is called the Aku Tengu Light. Proof that a synthetic boot can be durable. I have a lot of miles in these, a lot of death hikes. Fantastic. Gore-Tex runs all the way up to the top here. Great lug pattern on the bottom of these things. A little bit of the climbing zone on the bottom, but enough kind of siping and stuff in there that it's not a big deal. Good deep lugs. I think I've done 2 death hikes in these, the snowshoe one and the Frank Church for sure. Lots and lots of miles on these things. My critical aspect of them, a little bit stiffer than I like. I'd like a little bit more kind of lateral twist to them as well, and a little bit more ankle height. but overall, like a really good choice. They don't make this anymore, unfortunately. One of the best last shapes that I've ever had for my foot. Like brand new out of the box, put them on and good to go. Like if you're gonna buy a pair of boots, there's like a little bit of a progression. Like put them on, wear them to the office or wear them to work for a couple days, start to break them in, and then progress into, like, you can't buy a pair of boots, put your pack on and hike your neighborhood and go, yep, these feel great, and take them on a hunt. Like that gives you zero indication of how they're going to perform on a hunt once you get off trail in rough terrain. So definitely, like, you need to go stress test them before your hunt. You know, especially you're going up to Alaska. Again, like, it's why footwear is #1 episode. It's the most important thing, and you just start this process early on because it may take you going through a couple of them. Try to find boot companies or stores that allow you to have like a 30-day unconditional, try and find out. Like the Topo Athletic, they're awesome. You have 30 days. I think you could hike 200 miles in them, and as long as within 30 days, they'll take them back. I know from a business standpoint, it's probably tough to absorb some of that cost, but letting the people truly try them out and make sure they're going to work for them, I think in the long term, you're going to have a returning customer and be better off because of it. So lots of great things on this ACU. Again, a little too stiff, but good weight, good tread, great synthetic. The Gore-Tex held up very well in them. This is Scarpa Rush Trek Light. These were brand new last year, full synthetic, decent lug pattern on the bottom of them, good flexibility. I just ran into durability issues. So certainly where synthetic can go wrong is if the boot company doesn't really vet the fabric, doesn't put some miles onto it. Like when we're designing packs, like you gotta prototype the crap out of stuff because you just don't know. Like if you just put these together and go hike a few miles and go, yeah, those feel great, but they quickly started having issues on me. Other than that, they were a good choice. Other than just durability was really lacking. I think that was within a week of hunting. This, the Technica Plasma, they don't make this anymore. Lightweight, super flexible, super comfortable. Again, just like the ACU, like fantastic last shape to me. Just you slide your foot in there, it feels great. The synthetic's molding to my foot, it grabs on, like absolutely no hot spots, no blisters, no issues whatsoever at all. The Gore-Tex, surprisingly, like Technica, I think they definitely are, like, while it looks the same as the inside of a Solomon, like these things held up for me very well. They are still waterproof to this day, and these have my Doll sheep hunt in Alaska in 2022. I wore these for that hunt. Absolutely loved them. They've got good cushion in the heel, the right amount of kind of stability and flex built into it. If they took this, made it an 8-inch boot, and then the lugs on this are pretty so-so. Like they're just not very deep and it wears down. I mean, these have a lot of miles on them, but right now they're getting to the point where it's getting kind of questionable on, I need to retire them. So before I noticed they went, when you do find a pair of footwear, boots, shoes, whatever that you love, buy a couple pairs of them. So I did that. I saw that all of a sudden these went on sale. Like, oh crap, they're getting rid of them. They're going to discontinue them. I've got a brand new pair sitting in my gear bin at home, just waiting for me to bust them out. So again, like this to me, like if you took like the Solomon, the Crispy, and this, and they all kind of had a baby, you're somewhere in there is like that perfect footwear choice for me, and I would say for the vast majority of hunters. There's a lot of great things about these. And again, proof that synthetic can hold up well. These have no issues and a lot of days in them. Then you get into like a trail running shoe. And I do think this is actually like a story I tell in the podcast, but I started out bow hunting, I was 19 years old, just turned 40 this year, so 21 years ago. Everybody told me, go buy you need a stiff leather boot. So I went out and bought some Danners. Every day hunting, my feet freaking killed me. They're on fire, that classic like blisters. Second I got done hunting, get my boot off, let my feet dry out. Like, hated putting them on, but I was like, that's what I was required to wear when I was hunting. Well, one day they got absolutely soaked. I think it rained all morning, and the sun came out. It was nice and dry for the afternoon. And I was like, well, my boots are soaked. I don't want to put those on. And I just put on my like Nike tennis shoes I had. And that afternoon, it was like a light bulb went off for me, like, holy crap, this is amazing hunting in these. Like, why has everyone always told me I got to wear a leather boot? Again, for Alaska, for rough, rugged terrain, it's not the perfect choice. I do think you need a little bit more support and stability in there, but also I've spent a lot of days hunting. I hunted in September last year with these, ran, one area was super boggy, and I tried Gore-Tex socks, and that combination was fantastic. Your feet are going to be comfortable all day long. You're very nimble when you're out there hunting. Something that, something not to overlook if you're hunting. If you're elk hunting, you're deer hunting, it's not super rugged, rough terrain. I do think a trail running shoe has a valid place and should be in your arsenal. Your especially archery, elk hunting, they're quiet. You're able to sneak around a lot better, where you're going to be real clumsy in a bigger, heavier boot. Breathe well, dry fast, all that stuff. Again, non-Gore-Tex. So, one other note too, I forgot to mention, a lot of boots, if you're in country, well, rocks and logs, I like to have some type of tread pattern here in the middle. So if you're ever stepping on like a log, it's not just slick. I don't know what, these ones don't, there's nothing there. And if you've ever in like an area with a lot of downfall, I prefer to have some type of tread and grip there. So when you step on that log, it's not just right off of it. Crocs, or better known as all-terrains, like obviously I'm lightweight, I'm saving weight wherever I can, but more often than not now, I'm packing Crocs with me on a hunt, and not to use as camp shoes. This particular pair, over the last 3 years, I would say I've got 50 miles of packing meat, 100-pound packs out of country wearing these. When you get to trails, when you get to this actually started in 2020 on that first Dall sheep hunt. I was talking earlier about how we're working into the country, going up the creek, and Tyler's boots got wet. Well, on the way out, we're like, it was basically, 15 feet wide. I've got a picture of this, we'll dump into the video right now. It's like 15 feet wide, 20 feet wide, super brushy on the edges, and then this freaking glacier-fed creek that's, 5 feet to 10 feet wide, and, knee deep to waist deep. And it was a warm, sunny day, and we're just like, screw it. We put the Crocs on and walked right out that stream, and we just wore the Crocs the entire 15 miles out. Feet were absolutely comfortable the entire time. There's so much cushion built into them, and there's not enough, you can't get a blister because the shoe's just moving with you, right? Like the downside of a stiff boot, right? A blister is caused by friction, and if you've got your soft foot that's then rubbing up against something hard, that's where it's going to be a blister. So you're way more prone to get a blister in a stiff boot than you are into a tennis shoe. Not that you can't get blisters in a tennis shoe, you can get them between your toes, you can get them rubbing on your heels, but rubbing and friction is your biggest issue. You talk friction with a hard object, the blister is going to happen even faster. But do not overlook Crocs. Even if you're going on a hunt and you're unsure about your footwear choice. I had this happen on a bear hunt last year with Mark. He came out and I tried, AQ came out with a boot called the Trucker Light 3. I was like, I'll give it a shot. So I threw, actually forgot my Crocs. I had to borrow Mark's. But I did the hunt. My feet were killing me. I had blisters. Mark killed a bear. We had a 7-8 mile pack out, and I wore his Crocs the entire way. Fantastic, no issues at all. They certainly, especially when you're talking about Alaska, rivers can be your trails, where it's just so steep, so brushy in spots that a river's the only clear path you got out of that. So definitely don't overlook packing Crocs. I've spent a lot of miles in these things and absolutely love them. The only thing you need to do is make sure you get the model with a heel clamp on it that's adjustable, right? So you got Velcro here. You can slide that and adjust that to get your heel to lock in so it's not sliding around too much. But wear socks. Strap these things on your heels, and we call them all-terrains because they're pretty incredible. Jumping in, a couple of notes, I got some other things here. So this is Zamberlan Salath, came out a few years ago, I ordered them up. I was like, oh, that's cool, good Gore-Tex, kind of low top shoe, might be really nice. What I found is while they've got good toe flex, they don't have, in the heel in particular, there's not a lot of ability to twist and rotate. And if you're gonna have something stiff that doesn't move with you, you cannot pair that with a low top, right? Because my foot isn't allowed to adjust for the terrain, so it immediately just transfers to the ankle, and there's no support for that ankle. So even walking a flat trail by my house, like you're gonna bust your ankle up pretty quick. These were not, to me, I've got pretty strong ankles because I do a lot of hunting in this, in lower, very flexible shoes, and these things are a train wreck waiting to happen. So if you are someone who needs stiff for whatever reason, then you definitely want to err towards like that at least 8-inch high boot. Another option, these are Ultra Lone Peaks. Super, super comfortable. I put these out for one thing, like they have what's known as a really wide toe box, and why this is awesome for hiking flat trails. These are not great for getting off trail, and for two reasons. One, the wide toe box, your foot is allowed to slide in there a lot, and that's going to create friction, and you're just going to get like, may not get a blister, but you're going to have a really hot spot on the ball of your foot. And also I've noticed that especially the more technical terrain you get in, you don't want like a really wide tread pattern. While this is nice trail running and flat trails because it's all the impact, the force of your foot on the ground is spread, the cushion of that and the impact resistance cushioning is spread out over a larger area, which is a good thing on flat ground. On technical terrain, you can't like edge into hills and stuff because you're fighting that the sole is wider than your foot, and it's hard to like cut an edge into. So side hilling in these is really, really tough. One thing these do an amazing job at is locking around the midfoot. They have a special design here where this piece of webbing actually wraps all the way through, and as you cinch this up, it just clamps right down on there. So you could go down some pretty steep technical terrain. I actually wore this specific pair on 2018, our Frank Church death hike that we did, and we had like this 2,500 foot straight down rocky, real rocky thing, and they performed absolutely awesome. So a good choice for trail stuff, for very moderate terrain, you know, that kind of fall in with like the topos here, but not something you want to take in like really technical off-trail stuff. Next, insoles and socks. So good insole, absolute garbage. Like Crispy, everybody else is as guilty as providing just junk insoles. That like if you buy a pair of Crispies, Hanwag same way. Kenetrac actually provides a decent insole. Take these out, throw them in the trash, burn them, whatever. Like, get these companies to stop putting this crap in the shoe. There's absolutely no cushion to them. There's very little shape to keep your foot from sliding around. To me, it blows my mind. Like, they shouldn't even include them. If they're just going to put garbage in there, it should be just tell you, like, hey, you need to go buy your own insoles. And you can drastically change how your footwear feels and performs for you by changing out the insoles. And you really need, in my opinion, an arsenal of insoles. When going back to how boots are constructed in different lasts, some lasts are completely flat, some lasts has shape to them, and so the insole that you then put into that structure needs to kind of match and adapt to how the boot was built. And that's information that nobody talks about. You can't find that in any marketing information or technical specs about it. You just kind of got to try it. You can't to go do a custom insole that's designed for your foot but not account for the boot that it's going into, to me makes absolutely no sense, because the boot that it's going into may already have shape into it, so the two are going to be working against each other. So you need to understand that. I have a handful of good insoles that I found throughout the years that work well, and it just depends. Like, if I find a pair of boots that I like, I'll then cycle through different insoles. I'll do a training hike with one insole on left shoe and another one on the right shoe and find out what I like. And you really got to you got to get off trail, you got to get in technical terrain. I've had almost every single time I do this test, I have like for the first mile, it's like, oh yeah, insole on the right side is the better one for this. And then like somewhere around mile 2, mile 3, it changes. And by the time I get out, like my opinion's flipped 180 degrees. Insoles can provide good cushion. So this is the Superfeet Hike Max. Really a fantastic, like I found I can just about throw this in any boot and have a good choice. It's not perfect for all of them, but majority of the time it works really well. So good cushion, kind of a deep heel cup, but also there's this conflicting too much cushion So too much thickness down here is probably going to lift your heel out of the heel cup of the boot and create your heel to lift, and you're getting a blister on the back of your heel. So they did a really good job of like having cushion here but not elevating your heel too much to where you're out of that heel pocket that's designed into the boot. Also good shape, right? Like this is very flat basically in the back, where this has got a really good cup. So that's going to lock that heel in to the back of the boot, keep it from sliding left and right. And same thing as you go through to the midfoot, it's got like a medium arch to it. It's going to support your arch, but it also help lock that midfoot into the boot. And then going out into the toes, just got good cushion, where you take something like this. It's, you know, there's basically, I don't even know if there's cushion in there. There's spacer mesh, which we use on a backpack harness, which has some cushion feel to it, but honestly, the second you put any weight on that, it's gone. You're basically like, the difference between pushing on this and this is almost zero. So yeah, again, to me, I use the analogy, I said this in the podcast, like to me, the insoles that most of these boot companies put into their boots is like the equivalent of me selling you a K4 pack with no lumbar pad and not telling you that, oh, you probably need a better lumbar pad. It blows my mind, the lack of education there, and the fact that they throw, I don't know why they decide to cut corners. They spend so much time, energy developing a quality boot and then just throw this in there. So throw those out, start playing with good quality insoles. This is another one that I've got in this Laponia. So this is called Cadence. This came from, there's a footwear company, Foot Dynamics in downtown Boise, Idaho. They sell these there. I believe you can only get them at like licensed like footwear places. I don't know if they're available online. Really great, like really great cushion, has a lot of rebound to it. For me, this one, it's a little bit thicker in the heel, so depending on the boot that I'm putting my foot into, it may lift the heel cup out of it. So while I love these, it's kind of like what I would say a high volume insole. And so sometimes, depending on how much space is in the boot for my foot, these kind of do too much, right? But that's where you can cater, you know, if you got a boot and you're like, gosh, I really like this, but my foot's sliding around a little bit too much, right? You can get an insole that takes up more space. You can run a slightly thicker sock. You can adjust that. Talking about like these three components work together, right? So I can take a boot and I can run one insole in it with a thin sock, go do a training hike, and my feet kill me. Like, oh man, they're hot, they're sliding all over. Well, the next day, or I could go back to the truck, put a different insole and a different sock, get those to match up and have absolutely comfortable feet. So to me, you can really tailor like 20-25% one way or another how that footwear, how that boot is performing for you by adjusting your sock and insole. So you need a little bit of an arsenal of insoles to try out different options. If you just start with one, try this Hike Max, and then also different socks. So Darn Tough, these three are Darn Tough socks. They come in different cushion ratings. So look for like light cushion, medium cushion, full cushion, max cushion, and that's basically talking about how thick at the bottom of the foot that the fabric is, that the wool is on these ones, and it'll help fill up space inside the boot. I like my perfect thing, like these Technicas do it, like I can run a thin sock, be absolutely great, then put on like either if I run a thin liner sock with a sock over the top of it, or just put on a thicker sock. If I get in really technical terrain or cold weather, I can run that little bit thicker sock for more insulation. I never talked about that. Do not buy Thinsulate. Any insulated boot is absolutely asinine. Your number one enemy of cold feet is going to be because your feet got wet from sweat. You hiked 2, 3, 4, 5 miles in the country. It's first thing in the morning. It's cold. Your feet are sweating. You stop. Now you've got wet feet, and because that insulation, you're going to have wetter feet. There's going to be more sweat. There's more warmth in there. So like the worst thing would be for cold weather would be a leather boot with high insulation value, like a 400 gram or 800 gram insulation. Your feet are going to be colder because of that, versus if you wore an uninsulated synthetic boot, you could simply, these are going to breathe. You're going to keep your feet drier, and you're going to have warmer feet in that than you are in a leather boot with insulation. So stay away from that. Use your socks to adjust for insulation. It's colder weather. I said I want just ideally a touch bit more volume, so I can go to that thicker sock and have more insulation in there. And then just swap out socks too as you're going. So if you do stop, take the wet socks off, put on a dry sock, and you'll be way better off than running, if you just had one pair of socks with a leather Thinsulate Gore-Tex boot. So definitely just play with your sock thickness, play with the insole, and then match it to the boot. Play with all three of those, and you can really cater back and forth. And again, like going back to all these things we're talking about with gear, you need to have side-by-side comparisons. So go on a training hike, run a different sock on each side, run a different insole inside. You can't do like too many variables because you're not sure which one actually helped or made the situation worse. But I highly encourage you to do that when you're out there. Like every training hike I'll be doing all summer, especially as we're gearing up, getting closer to the hunts, I'm going to be dialing in. I'm going to keep looking. Maybe the perfect boot's like yet to be released and will be released this summer. Every year I seem to try 4 or 5 new pairs and keep looking for that perfect one, that all around like Western mountain hunting boot, to me just doesn't exist yet. So that's a lot. There's even more information in the podcast Mark and I recorded. I hope some of that helps you. Just don't accept that your feet have to hurt. You should absolutely be able to do the hardest hunts you can imagine and still have comfortable, dry feet at the end of the day. If, like I said, go back, like if the first thing you would do is want to take your footwear off once you get to camp, if you're dealing with blisters, if you're dealing with hot spots, keep looking, keep searching. I guarantee you're going to find some combination out there that you will have no issues with. So again, hopefully some of that helps you guys. Stay tuned for more information to come from the Experience Project.